The snow continues to come down in Reno as we start vlog 202. My voice has seen better days, but things poker-wise have been going pretty well. A couple of weeks back, I said the only session of the week in which I won came on the day that I vlogged. Well, last week, the only session of the week I lost came on the day that I vlogged. Let's pay off what I teased at the end of the last vlog, and that is $1,000 swings. I asked you guys to guess what percentage of my total sessions in 2022 were $1,000 decisions either way. And it was not a surprise to find out that a bunch of you guys nailed it. And funny enough, the answer is exactly a third of the time. 33% of the sessions last year were either $1,000 wins or $1,000 losses. We had a guy from Chicago nail it. Fubar2231. He nailed that one. Shook, if that's how he says it. Got it. As did Playin' Rags 8183. I love how this guy just gets in there. 33% winner. It's like he's just calling his shot. He just knows it. All right, so will we win or lose $1,000 today? The answer to that question is probably yes, because this percentage is going significantly up this year. I'm not going to guarantee that I make more money than I made last year. That's going to be tough to pull off, especially given the fact that it's been a bit of a rough start. But I know that 33% is only going up. I'd show up at the poker room at 11 a.m. to see work being done on a long-needed addition to the room, which you'll see in future vlogs. We fire up a 5-10 winner straddle game on table 1 and I buy in for $1,000. On this day, I'd play the first hand I'd get dealt when I made it $40 with queens from the big blind 6-handed. Under the gun limper calls, and the button and the hijack also contribute 30 more as well. So with 160 in, the first pot of the day we go 4 ways to 10-8 deuce 2 spades. I'm first to act and decide to bet half the pot here. Both under the gun and the button decide to call that bet. And with 400 in, the turn comes the 3 of spades. Obviously not a great card bringing in front door spades, but I do have the queen in my hand. And it's worth a bet. So I just bet 100 here. Under the gun goes out, but the button doesn't. So with 600 in, the river rolls off an offsuit jack. Now I'm losing to Jack 10 in addition to possible flushes, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try and extract a little more value here. So I make it 120, which I figure would make it difficult for him to fold King 10 or Ace 10 too. He thinks about it for a minute and does call. So we have an $840 pot. I show my hand and he mucks. Is it a floral themed day in here?
Yes. What? How did you know?
I'm just not, I'm very perceptive.
I'm sorry you didn't get the email. You could have had a tie or something to match.
I could have taken part in this, is what you're saying?
Yes. That's
How did
exactly
I miss
what I'm
that
saying.
email? Damn it.
Next time, Ben. Next time.
After that, I'd 3-bet Ace King before taking the pot down by c-betting a 7-7-8 flop. And shortly after, I looked down at aces and got called when I 3-bet to 110 before a snap fold happened on the flop. So a hot start for sure in a game that was good, but not great. And I do just have to give a shout out to the guys that were in that lineup to start this day. You just cannot get a nicer collection of guys than we saw. Scott, Sean, Dennis, Steve, and a couple others. It was truly great in that regard. Under the gun limps 7-handed. I have Ace King in the low jack and make it 45. The hijack defends the rock and the limper completes. So with 140 in, the flop comes out Ace King 3, 2 diamonds. Per usual in these spots, I like to make just a very standard looking bet. So I just put in 60. The hijack mucks, but the under the gun limper does not. So with 260 in, the turn is an offsuit queen and he checks. I bet 125, obviously hoping that he has improved to 2 pair, but still thinking that his aces and diamond flush draws may not want to relinquish quite yet. Turns out, he only had 175 total in his stack, and relinquishing was never part of the plan. As he says that he's just going to go all in. And I say I'm just going to have to call. So it's a $610 pot, and it turns out that he has Ace 6 drawing dead, and that pot gets shipped this direction. I then noticed that apparently the poker room entryway isn't the only portion of the casino that's going to be looking different soon. I then raise ace-queen and flop a queen, which resulted in me winning about 200 before getting a pair of folds on the turn. The very next hand, I'm in the big blind, which means the winner's straddle goes to the butt because the rule states you can straddle in every position but the blinds. And we would get a couple of limps, and I would look down at aces. Getting 3 folds here would be just an abject disaster. And I have a good image at this point, which will result in me not getting called quite as light. So with that in mind, I just made it 4x. Normally I'd go more. Both limpers decide to call me on this, but the straddle doesn't. So with 130 in, the board comes out 7-7-3 with 2 clubs, and I'm first to act. I figure I'm actually going to need to size down, given my current image, to keep hands like 8s and 9s in there in this spot, so I just bet 50. Under the gun calls, and the cutoff decides to fold. So with 230 in, the turn is an offsuit 10. Sticking with my same thought process, I opt to just bet $80 here. Under the gun thinks for a second before raising me to 200. This isn't a player that I know, but he has shown me nothing to believe that he wasn't going to have a big hand here. Problem is, there just aren't that many big hands he can have. And I'm not ready to be convinced I'm beat quite yet. So I call, and with 630 in, the river is an offsuit 9, and I check. He thinks for a second, and then announces a bet of $350. Now this is going to go a lot longer of a way towards convincing me here. I didn't figure that he was limp calling under the gun with a 7 in his hand too often, and if his story is true, he didn't have one. I folded the hand, and he would later say that he had pocket 10s, and I just saw little evidence to support that he would ever lie about that in that spot. Hopefully, I made the right fold. For some reason, and nobody really knows what the reason is, but the hand Jack 9 suited has been dubbed the franchise at Peppermill. And for whatever reason, I like it, so I'm just going to go with it. And in this hand, I lose about $55 when I decided to squeeze with it and got limp raised to 150, and I mucked and got showed a pair of queens. I then call a raise with ace-10 offsuit and flop top pair, top kicker. Front door spades came in on the turn, which came prior to me turning trips on the river. I bet those 3 10s, and then faced a small check raise. I decided to pay that off with a spade blocker to go along with the fact that I beat a small portion of his value range, but, as I kind of expected, I got shown the nut flush and lost a little under $400 in the hand. But the moral of that story was that I had told myself that I was simply going to stop playing ace-10 offsuit in spots like that, so in this case, I paid the price for breaking the policy. By the way, I just can't resist doing this. Some of you have seen this. I'm scrolling through my phone. I just can't stop laughing at this video. It's almost like a Darwin Award of golf. A guy trying to hit his ball off a frozen lake. Absolutely unreal. The game finally fills up and we start seeing some big pots, including this one, when the gentleman who cracked my aces got his cracked by trip queens in this hand. By the way, speaking of things on the internet, I got a laugh out of the fact that Robbie J. Lou took to Twitter and mentioned the octo crab. Now, if the term octo crab is being mentioned on poker Twitter, it's definitely a result of this vlog, which Jeff Boski pointed out to me. Oh, and shortly after that, I did get dealt the hand, but didn't play it. Mr. Z then joins the game and doesn't waste any time raising to 160 when I had pocket 7s. I decided to try for it, but my set mining operation failed, and he showed kings. And as if getting shown kings once wasn't good enough, I got shown them again on the very next hand. I opened ace-9 and ended up laying it down immediately. Good news was I wasn't up against kings 3 hands in a row, though, just the 2. All right, this is a mid-session update, and I got a problem. A problem with something that I mentioned in the last mid-session update, and that is in Pulp Fiction, when Vincent Vega and Jules Winfield go to the apartment of Brett.
Yes, you did, Brett!
They're making that trip at 7:20 in the morning. Big Kahuna Burger would not be open at 7:20 in the morning, and even if it was, those guys would not be awake to order it. I've always had a problem with this, but sometimes you have a problem with the things you love the most. that's the end of the update. So after giving back several hundred of my winnings, I look to recoup some of them on a hand that's going to stand out. It comes when we get a limp. I have my favorite hand, pocket 8s in the hijack and make it 50. Cutoff straddle calls, and the limper MP1 completes. So with 155 in, the board comes out King, King, 9, Rainbow. MP1 checks and it's on me. In a pure mathematical sense, 8s are going to be good here a decent amount of the time. The percentage of the time that one of these two guys has trips is going to be fairly small, and the percentage that both of these guys have trips is going to be even smaller. Spoiler alert, this is one of those. I figured a small bet was in order, so I just put in over half the pot, making it 85. Cutoff calls, and MP1 calls too. You're going to have to take my word for this next part. And what I mean by that is I told myself the only way I was going to put another dime into this pot was if an 8 came. And with 410 in, one did. MP1 now decides to lead out for 200. After some debate, figured I could potentially min-raise this hand and get action from both of these guys. So that's what I decided to do. I made it 400. The cutoff, who's an unknown but clearly a good player, barely thinks about it for more than 10 seconds and jams all in.
All in bet.
He has me covered, so it's 1,100 more for me to call. But before we even get to me, MP1, the short stack, decides to put all of his remaining chips in as well. So his last 400 plus go in, and it's back on me. There's 3,000 in this pot, and it's going to cost me $1,100 to try and win it. The question is, would he take this line with ace-king? He didn't 3-bet pre-flop, and he didn't raise the flop with 3 of us in there. So that felt unlikely. King 9, pocket 9s, and King 8, especially that last one being in the straddle, kind of felt the most likely. It should also be pointed out that he didn't really seem all that worried about how much I had left. He just shoved it in. So I was torn. It would obviously be a disaster to fold the best hand here. But if I don't have the best hand, I'm basically dead. And it certainly felt like I was beat. So I gave it some serious thought. I probably spent 2 or 3 minutes thinking about this with my final 1,100 up for grabs. And after that, I decided to make what was going to either be a really good or a really bad fold. MP1 shows King 7, so I had him beat the short stack. And the cutoff does show King 8. He'd already been having one of those dream days, and it only got better with one of the most brutal turn cards in the history of this vlog. I drink some green tea and try to help with the voice, and a pretty loose player raised to 40 over the straddle under the gun, and once again, I look down at pocket aces. I raised to 115 here, and in a somewhat ironic twist following that mid-session update, a man named Brett decides to cold call this from the big blind. Under the gun calls as well, so with 355 in, we are 3 ways to Queen 8-6 2 clubs. Check to me, and I make a bet of $140 here, and it's back over to Brett. He thinks about it for a minute and jams all in. Under the gun folds. I have 700 left here. He has me covered, and once again, I was in a spot where I just didn't feel like I was getting bluffed. It also didn't feel like he would simply overplay a queen here. I wasn't sure if he would take this line with a set, but I just didn't feel like I was good. But what hand is he going to call $115 pre-flop with here? It was puzzling. But after some deliberation, I decided I could get away from this hand. And for the second time on the day, my pocket aces hit the muck. Now, Brett's a friend of this vlog and asked me if I want to see, and I say yes, and he shows 8-6 of spades for the 2 pair. Wow. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this next hand because this is becoming more and more common in live cash games. It's not something that I've advocated for, but it's also not something that I've advocated against. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute as we get a couple of limps and I pick up ace-queen and raise to 55. Local legend, Mr. Z defends his rock in the hijack. And as you'll see, 2 of the limpers call. So with 225 in, we're 4 ways to ace 8-4 rainbow. Limpers check to me, and I bet 110 here. Mr. Z in the hijack decides to call my bet with the limper snap folding. So with 445 in, the turn is the 7 of spades. Wanting to value target his weaker aces, I decide to just bet 150 here. And he barely thinks about it for a second and slides his entire stack of black chips into the pot, putting me all in. I'm pretty short at this point, after a brutal past couple of hours. So, this decision is only for my last several $100s. I've played more hands against this opponent than any other in my poker career. And while he loves to bluff, this is not the kind of spot that he typically chooses to be bluffing in. So I just don't know what hand I expect to see. I just know that ace-queen isn't going to be any good here. So I lay it down. And he shows not what I expected to see. He shows ace-king. So you see the trend I'm talking about. Even the most aggressive players don't like playing big pots with ace-king and may very well just call out of the straddle with it pre-flop. I've often talked about how you have to have ace-king against ace-queen on an ace-high board or a very similar situation to win a big pot with it. He had that and still couldn't get full value out of ace-king. So I'm just getting brutalized, and if all that wasn't enough, I raised pocket 10s to 50 and got 5 callers en route to a king-queen-9 flop. That's the power of a losing image. As Bart Hansen always says on CrushLifePoker.com, image is a function of winning and losing, not how loose or tight you actually are. And one of the great advantages to me over my entire poker career is I've never looked at it that way. I've always tried to pay attention to how loose or tight people are in a general sense, not just how they're doing on the day, but that is not the norm. So after a white hot start, we then experienced 2 of the most brutal hours in the history of the blog. But, in all honesty, I was not at all on tilt because I made the correct folds. I was also happy because the game was good. The double Ds were nowhere to be found, and we had some guys in the game that liked to give action. So I'd lost most of my stack, but here's the good news, and some of you may not know this. The Peppermill offers unlimited rebuys in cash game poker. I decided to ask this dealer if she could confirm that, and she did. She's all right. I'd add on a hockey puck and look to get even. When I got aces for the 3rd time on the day, I thought that might be the time, but that time everyone folded, and I won $5. I walk away from the table and come back to find an aces over kings cooler being shipped to the player on my right. I would win a few small pots, and then I would get action from 3 guys when I 3-bet kings, though they all folded to me on a 9-9-6 flop. Shortly after that, as if I was just talking about how this was a bad idea, I would 3-bet ace-king and c-bet after not hitting anything. Shockingly, all that resulted in was me losing about $300 in that scenario. I would then make a stupid mistake in a hand against a guy who slow played just his pair of kings on both the flop and the turn, and I ended up paying him off on the river with a pair of 10s in a spot where I definitely should not have done it, in what was the most regrettable hand of the day for me. But that then takes us to our last hand. I raised to 40 from +1 with pocket kings. Mr. Z calls in the low jack, and the hijack comes in as well. So with 125 in, we go 3 ways to a flop of king 7-9 2 hearts, giving me top set. I bet out for 65 here, and the low jack snap calls me. The hijack, though, doesn't call, and fortunately for me, he doesn't fold either. He puts in $225. With a likely draw to my left, I'm just going to fast play this bad boy. I slide in a hockey puck announcing 600. Low jack folds, and it's back over to the raiser, who, to my everlasting delight, says that he's all in a spot in which I had to assume was set over set, but it wasn't. He showed the 9-7, basically drawing dead We ran it twice. Obviously, I would hold on both boards, and that sizable pot gets shipped this direction. I'd play for about another hour, which would end my 8-hour session. I would rack up, book the win, and head outside to a frosted over car. All right, cashing out, booking a win of $1,412. What? A session. Started out on fire, as you saw. Then, probably ran as bad as you can possibly run for an hour or 2-hour stretch. But, managed to kind of keep myself in the game. A couple of laydowns with pocket aces, and then that laydown with the full house kind of enabled me to stay in the game until I found myself in the dream spot, which I, luckily, managed to get in with that set of kings against the 2 pair there at the end. So a very tumultuous day, up and down, roller coaster ride, booking the win here at Peppermill. It just will not stop snowing in the Reno area. It's kind of reminiscent back in January of '97, where the previous month they just got so much snow, where downtown Reno proceeded to flood that month. And I am not kidding when I say that you could have valet parked a boat at some of the downtown Reno casinos had they not been shut down as a result of the flood. Anyway, I almost forgot to mention maybe the most interesting thing about that trivia type situation that I put for you on the last vlog. And I will do that after I remind you to get on to ClubGG Poker. GG Poker has become the name when it comes to internet poker. And if you're playing in the United States, well, ClubGG is the place to go. You can get a 10% deposit bonus just by mentioning this vlog with the hosts on Telegram. So if you're one of these guys that likes to get after it on these apps, and by the way, I see a lot of guys in the games that I play in that are playing a second game on an app while in the actual game. Now, I don't do that, but I'm impressed by some of you guys that do. Some of you, though, may be on the wrong app, and I'm not talking to you, local favorite Dave B. There's no way I'm talking to you, bro. I'm not talking to you about this. No way you're playing on the wrong app. Anyway, check out Carolina Poker, ClubGG, all the information in the description below. Maybe the most amazing thing about the trivia question I put forth about what percentage of my sessions in 2022 were $1,000 decisions was the fact that while there were hundreds of comments, and maybe this has changed, I'm recording this on Friday morning, but I doubt it. The 33% number, which was the correct answer, was the most common guess of any guess. I just find that amazing. I mean, I really think that the viewers to this vlog are going to be, on average, the best poker players of viewers to any vlog out there. And obviously, I know you guys watch multiple vlogs, but the ones that have been loyal to this vlog, I do think would be able to hold their own against anyone else. That's for sure. Very sharp viewers we have here, no doubt about it. And a lot of you just missed it by 1 percentage point or 2 percentage points. So pretty impressive stuff. That'll wrap things up for this edition of the vlog. Hoping to have a better voice next week. Hit those like and subscribe buttons and follow me on Instagram at bendeach. And we are back here next time.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so